Amazing.
And I am showing that we are right at 4 p.m.
All right. Well, I'll welcome everybody to this Thursday webinar. My name is Mark Varian. I'm one of the archaeologists here at Crow Canyon, and I'm very excited to be moderating this webinar tonight. The webinar is brought to you by the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, and it's a part of the Four Corners Lecture Series, which is organized by many different institutions, including the Bureau of Land Management, the Monticello Field Office, and Bears Ears National Monument. And of course, this is being done in partnership with Edge of the Cedars State Park Museum. The title of our presentation tonight is Cataloging Archaeological Connections at Edge of the Cedars, and it's by James Willian, Jay Willian, I'm sorry, Jay, and Jonathan Till. And I'm just so excited about it because Edge of the Cedars is my favorite museum in the world. We're given this little content warning that this webinar contains images of artifacts, and that includes not many, but a few images of animal bones, or what we call faunal remains. If looking at animal bones disturbs you, you should log off and tune in to future webinars. But I don't think this is going to be a big issue with this talk tonight. The Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, Hickory Apache people on whose traditional homelands our institution sits and upon which we work and reside. Our mission-related work wouldn't be possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future, and we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humankind. Crow Canyon's grateful to all Indigenous people and supports the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. And that really fits with Crow Canyon's mission, which is to empower present and future generations by making the human past accessible and relevant through archaeological research, experiential education, and American Indian knowledge. You can see our web address there, crowcanyon.org. And if you've never looked at our website, it really has a lot of educational and research and other content in it. It's well worth logging on and scrolling through and looking through that website. Our webinar series is a real important part of how we communicate about these topics to the larger public, and we really thank you for supporting our webinar series. This is a picture of campus. It's kind of got words in front of it, but that's the center of campus with the iconic Sleeping Ute Mountain in the background. This is a Zoom presentation. Most of you are probably tuned in with Zoom. Probably the most important thing is Jonathan and Jay will take questions at the end, and we'll try to get to all of them. But it's best for you to submit those questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or wherever it's located on your Zoom screen, rather than typing them into the chat. If you're having trouble with the Zoom, you can head over to our live stream on Crow Canyon's Facebook page. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube page at that address that you see there. And that's really great because we publish all of these webinars virtually the day or the day after they're presented. So there's a whole series of them, and they're all really excellent. And if there's things you see tonight that you want to go back and look at again, that's a good way to go back to this webinar and look at something more intensively. We have upcoming webinars. Next Thursday is Practicing Place-Based Experiential Learning in Public Archaeology by Drs. Elaine Franklin and Josie Chang Order, both of whom were educators for many years at Crow Canyon, but have moved on to other positions. Although they were both here recently, including Josie being a teacher in a National Endowment for Humanities Teachers Institute that we just completed last week. That webinar is next Thursday, August 11th. Then we're skipping a week, and the next webinar will be Thursday, August 25th. And that will be Mesa Verde National Park presenting Past Meets Present, two groundbreaking superintendents from Mesa Verde by Casey Cook Collins. Looking forward to both of those. And that brings us to tonight's webinar. I'm happy to turn this over to Jay and Jonathan. Jonathan Till is an archaeologist and has his MA in anthropology from the University of Colorado Boulder. Jonathan's worked for the U.S. Forest Service, the Navajo Nation, the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, and a few cultural resource management firms. He's been the curator of Edge of the Cedars since 2015 and lives in Bluff, Utah. And Jonathan is a big fan of rhubarb pie. He wanted me to tell you that. I'll also tell you that he was, I forget the exact award he won, but it was the Utah State Parks or Museum Employee of the Year in 2020. So it was great that Jonathan's excellent work was recognized in that way. Jay Willian is an archaeologist in Bluff, Utah, who's worked for over 20 years in the Southwest, primarily in Southeast Utah and New Mexico. He began work on this cataloging project that they'll be talking about at Edge of the Cedars Museum in 2018. And he has a famous dog Spirit that has a Chaco and Arid great house named after him. So Jonathan and Jay, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm really looking forward to the talk.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction there, Mark. Really appreciate that. Let's see. We're going to do the share screen here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start sharing our screen here. Let's see. So this one here, I guess. Here we go. All right. Is my screen shared there?
Yep, you're coming through.
Okay,
Perfect.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm going to just say a few words and then get out of the way. This is really a Jay's basketball game to manage. Jay's, I'd like to introduce Jay a little bit more. Jay got his BA from Carleton College and his MS in botany from the Miami University of Ohio. He's been working in the Four Corners, living and working in the Four Corners area for about 25 years now, engaged very actively in archaeological work. And that will come through in our presentation tonight, I'm sure. He's my go-to man for several things, historic cans for one, and anything regarding Ute archaeology. But if ever I have a question about anything that I'm looking at in the museum and Jay's around, I confer with Jay. He's just a really great colleague and very experienced, and we're really blessed to have him helping us out here. Jay started working with us actually in 2017, scanning slides for the BLM, and it became apparent that he pretty quickly that he had a lot of time in between slide scanning sessions. That took a while for that machine to work, and so we started to catalog things, BLM collections, and that let me get an idea of how long it took a person to catalog collections, especially Jay, and we were able to develop or write grants to have Jay work on BLM collections solely after that, cataloging artifacts. Jay's great experience in the area and his experience in botany really comes to the fore when he's looking at especially some of these collections that have large amounts of perishable items in them, especially plants, plant remains. Jay has just been an invaluable resource for looking at those. The gist of this work, cataloging, is not to do an analysis, a full-blown analysis of these things. Rather, these are essentially to catalog, to inventory the things that we have here at the edge of the Cedars, so that we can turn around, and if a person who does specialize in analysis of one thing or another, we can turn around and say, hey, we have these objects of maize, or we have this kind of pottery for you. But Jay is so darn good that these cataloging sessions are actually like many analysis sessions. So there's a lot of wonderful detail that Jay dials into in his cataloging work for us. So it really helps us, it really helps set us up to do more work, more analysis work down the road. With that, I think, Jay, I'm going to turn this over to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, back up. Yeah. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, just a few quick factoids, some ideas of how much work Jay has done. In the slide here, you can see that Jay's looked at mostly, well, he's looked at 17,500 plus items, or lots of items. So by lots of items, I mean, sometimes there's a bag that comes through that has 100 pottery sherds or 100 rock flakes in it. And so those get cataloged as just one item or one object. Sometimes, yes, very good. And yeah, you can see on this slide here that indeed, if you count up the debitage, Jay has looked at 43,000 flakes. He hasn't analyzed that many, but he's worked with 43,000 flakes, 13,000, almost 14,000 corn cobs there, maize cobs. Same thing with pottery sherds, nearly 14,000 sherds. Another little factoid, Jay's looked at over 450 projectile points from these BLM collections. So lots of stuff, lots of really good information going into our cataloging database. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, to Jay, and Jay's going to share with you some of the highlights from these collections, especially working with the things that are perishable. He's chosen to go with those materials for the most part. Way there, Jay.
Thank you, Jonathan, and welcome everybody. So putting together this particular presentation was sort of like being a parent trying to decide which of my 1,000 children were my favorites, because there were so many items that were of interest to me from a whole host of different accessions that I've cataloged over these last 4 or 5 years. We decided to narrow it, this presentation, to one particular, to one particular site, and put the emphasis on that site, and then with a handful of artifacts at the end that come from different accessions at different sites. That site is what is known as Boomerang Shelter. It is a north-facing alcove that is in Comb Ridge. Here's a map. Little sketch map of southeast Utah. You can see Bluff down bottom center, edge of the Cedars, sort of top center. Comb Ridge is off to the northwest of Bluff. And so Boomerang Shelter is in Comb Ridge, and it was excavated in part by a field school run by Northern Arizona University back about 1998, 99, 2000. As part of the Colorado Plateau Agricultural Origins Project. And the reason that Boomerang, I think, was chosen was it had been heavily looted in the early, at some point. And a ranger who was investigating Boomerang discovered a sandal fragment amongst the debris that had been exposed by the looters that was archaic in age. I think it ultimately dated to be something like 8,000 years before present. But in addition to the archaic presence that was there in Boomerang, there was also a very strongly expressed Bassmaker 2 presence, along with a later P2, P3 minor component. So here is an overview shot of Boomerang. It's got an incised drainage out in front of it. This is sort of looking west. Here's view looking back to the east-southeast. In that platformed area is the principal area of excavation in that project. That's myself on the left. This is from a recent visit. And here is a view looking to the west again of that platformed area. This is a site that, to me, as with many excavations, it's sort of like peeling back the surface of the ocean, in that there's so much underneath the surface. And I was lucky enough to actually visit Boomerang during that field school for one day back about 1999. And what they exposed there was an incredible network or array of slab-lined cysts, just layer after layer after layer. I wish I had a photograph of that. Unfortunately, those photographs are all slides, and they're all in my vault at this point in time. And then amongst, in particular, the artifacts that we're going to focus on today, or that I'm going to focus on today, are perishables out of Boomerang Shelter. And so there's not going to be much in terms of ceramics. There's not going to be much in terms of projectile points, but a lot of plant material and some fauna material also. One last thing, if you were to walk into Boomerang today, probably the most noticeable evidence of prehistoric use are some of the boulders out in front. Here's a couple of boulders that have grinding troughs and incised grooves. There's not a lot of artifacts exposed on the surface, and there's no evident architecture. So as one would imagine, there is a huge quantity, among the specimens that were collected, a huge quantity of agricultural related material, and in particular corn. And very early on in my cataloging of Boomerang, I came across this particular lot, and it was one of those that was just absolutely magic to me. As you can see, it is assortment of corn kernels, but there towards the center is actually a popped kernel of corn. And I would just looked at that in amazement at the time, and I'm like, how can this be? It's like, and I knew that popcorn was cultivated prehistorically, but it was like, this is a popped kernel of corn that's over 2,000 years old. And I ran to Jonathan, I told him about it, and we contacted Karen Adams and said, can this possibly be true? And she got back to us and said, yeah, it's rare, but yeah, it's a popped kernel of corn, and it's ancient. There's a close-up of it. So this was sort of like a good sign to me very early on in the project to have this. Here's a couple of whole ears of corn that were collected off the surface, as in they were exposed during the looting incident. There were probably 4 or 5 ears of corn, I think, that were collected out of Boomerang. Hundreds and thousands of corn cobs and partial corn cobs. These are the 6 different lots that are comprise one box at this point in time of corn cobs.
Swimming in maize.
Swimming in maize.
Yeah.
Here is the contents of a similar bag showing both whole and partial corn cobs. The project did a lot of C14 dating and focusing on corn and on squash artifacts. Here are 4 corn cobs that were sampled for C14 dating. And it wasn't just kernels of corn and corn cobs that were present in the site. It was clear that whole plants had been brought in. There were all sorts of pieces of stalk. And so on the left here, we have the base of a corn stalk that actually has the roots still, partial roots still present. On the right, we have corn tassels. And in the project, they sorted these out before delivering them to us. And here's another lot that has an assortment of corn peduncles. That is the section of stalk right beneath the ear, sections of corn stalk. There's a piece of corn tassel. There's another base of a corn stalk on the right-hand side there. There's leaves that are still attached to some of those corn stalk pieces. Here is a corn peduncle that has been pierced in the center and it was pierced so either cordage or yucca leaf could be threaded through it, and then the whole ear be suspended for drying. Here is an interesting corn cob artifact. It's what's known as a cob on a stick. These show up over a wide area prehistorically, including the Fremont region. This one actually has a piece of yucca cordage jammed in along with the stick. I think there were 2 cobs on sticks that were in Boomerang, and both of them had yucca cordage associated with them. I'm not an expert on cobs on sticks, but this is the only, I think these are the only ones that I remember seeing that actually have the associated yucca cordage. Another interesting corn cob and yucca fiber artifact. In this case, you have 2 partial corn cobs that were through drilled or through punched, and they had a section of yucca fiber threaded through them that is knotted at either end. I have no idea what the purpose is. Here's an assortment of corn quids. And this is an area where I definitely was learning something when it came to quids, because when I came into this project, my general thought was that quids tended to be associated with fiber manufacturers, and they are fiber quids. And so you were chewing on something like yucca to produce fiber for cordage. And what I discovered in this project is the vast majority of quids were actually corn. And as you can see, they range from some that were just barely sucked on or chewed on to some that were so well masticated that they were just reduced to a pulp. There were hundreds of quids that were recovered from this particular project. Here's an interesting bundle of corn husks and several sticks. And this seems very purposeful. And so you've got an assortment of corn peduncles where the husks have been pulled back tightly, and then they've been grouped together. And then 4 sticks have been included with them that are unbarked. They don't seem to be further modified. One still has a partial branch sticking off of it. And then they've been bound with first juniper bark and then knotted yucca leaf. This seems to be, it doesn't seem to be a casual thing, but once again, I don't have an understanding of what the purpose is. Here's a detail slide that shows the 4 sticks in the upper left, along with the knotted leaf in the center. Here we have a corn peduncle where the husks have been pulled back tightly and then twisted, and then the twisted corn husks from either side have been twisted into two sections, and then they've been knotted at the bottom to form a ring. And I don't know if this was something that was practical or if there's something more of this particular effect. Along with corn, there are occasionally beans. And it's not clear to me whether the beans are possibly associated with the Bassmaker tube occupation there. Typically, they would show up later. I can't remember if they actually did any dating of the beans, but there were a fair number of beans in this site. And they could well be associated with the Pueblo II, Pueblo III use of the shelter. All the beans were monocolor, and they tended to be a dark red that verged on purple black depending on the light. Typically, there was only 1 or 2 beans in any particular lot. But there was one remarkable lot that had something like 450 beans in it. And I can't remember the particulars of them being found. But they weren't in a container or anything like that. And this particular, this little tray of beans is on display currently in the museum. Lots and lots of squash in this collection also. Here's an assortment of squash seeds. And here's another area where I learned a lot, as in I had occasionally seen squash, woody squash rind in dry alcove sites, but I hadn't really given it much thought. And this site had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fragments of woody squash. And among other things, I realized that I really wasn't that familiar with woody shelled winter squash being cultivated today. I do know I did buy a Warty Hubbard squash this last fall, and it had developed a woody shell, but just a remarkable assortment or quantity of squash rind or squash shell in this site. And a number of them showed some sort of modification indicating secondary use. There were pieces that had finished edges. There were pieces that had holes that looked like mend holes to them. And there were pieces that had pine resin on the interior, that had various pigments or traces of clay on the interior. This particular slide shows the squash rind in a single lot, and I'm sure this was a surface collection being made cleaning up the looting incident. Here's a nice detail of another squash rind lot, where you can actually see the skin that survived on some of these. And this was, I didn't have much in the way of reconstructible squash artifacts, but this was, or squash rind artifacts, but this is one example of like maybe 3 or 4 that I was able to partially reconstruct, and it is a shaped piece of squash rind that appears to have been disc-like. It's got a finished margin, and these holes are smaller than what I was referring to as possible mend holes. And by mend holes, I'm referring to the type of drill holes that you see in ceramic vessels that are being repaired. And as you would recall, those types of holes tend to be paired, so they can be threaded with fiber or a thong or something like that. This particular artifact has much smaller holes punched through it, and the holes are not paired, and they seem to be distributed both along the rim and through the body of the artifact. If you look closely on the left-hand fragment, and then the upper margin, you can also see traces of pine pitch. And so it looks as if this particular artifact was being used as a seal for some sort of vessel. I don't know the age. I don't know if it's pre-ceramic and it's basket maker 2. That'd be my guess. But other than that, I can't say. But what also strikes me is that those holes are so small, and their distribution, it seems to indicate that whatever is being sealed in this container or whatever it was actually being allowed to breathe. It's allowed to have airflow back and forth. Yeah. And that brings me to another question that I have in my mind. And I'm sort of a gourd head, so to speak, as in I was growing gourds back when I was a student in Ohio, and I love gourds. And I got to thinking, it's like, I'm not seeing real conclusive evidence of gourds in this assemblage. Here we have one of only 2 gourd artifacts that's in the museum collection that I'm aware of. This is a bilobed gourd canteen. It is not from Boomerang. The provenience is unknown. It's the canteen that has a corncob stopper and yucca cordage for carrying it. And here is an example from that same accession, unknown provenience, of a squash container with a small hole opened up in it. And just take notice that on the left-hand side is the stem of that squash and how thick it is. It's like a pumpkin. Pumpkin's a squash, and but it's much thicker than a gourd stem would be. And also, when I was looking at this photograph after I'd taken it, I noticed that there's a reticulate pattern that's in the skin there. And I think that actually might be an indication that this was once in a carrying harness, but I can't be absolutely sure of that it's not some sort of incised design. But anyhow, I got to thinking, there is no evidence of gourds in this. And it just struck me as odd, given that gourds inform early ceramic forms. And so, digressing once again, here is a comparison of squash seeds versus gourd seeds. They're very distinct. I mean, folks who are familiar with the two would never make the mistake of one for the other. As it turns out, there is not a single recognized gourd seed in the entire Edge of the Cedars collection as of right now, which just strikes me as amazing. And once again, very, very curious. And this is something that I plan to look into a little bit further. But I just like, how can there not be a single gourd seed? And I don't know at this point, I don't know if, for example, with boomerang, whether that basket maker 2 occupation actually predates gourd cultivation in this region. I would have thought not, but perhaps it does. Or maybe gourd cultivation is just that much rarer than I would have thought. And so in addition to the agricultural plant material, there's also a lot of, there's indication of wild seed collection too. This was a fascinating lot, and it is a bag full of wild seeds. And I actually, when I visited Boomerang back in '99 or whatever it was, they had just uncovered this. And one of the investigators there was Mick Robbins. And Mick was just super psyched to sit here and show me this field specimen of wild seeds. And he was asking me, it's like, what do you think these are? And I'm like, actually, I can't really tell looking at these. When this was turned over to the museum, I don't know if it was Mick or somebody else had identified some of the species represented as being from Amaranthus. Another Chenopodiaceae seed, Cycloloma triplicofolia, if I spelled that correctly, I'm not sure I did. And then another Chenopodiaceae, Coryspermum villosum. I think I can recognize the Amaranthus seeds in there. I'd have to familiarize myself with the other two. Having looked at this, I also noticed a few ricegrass seeds in there too. There was a lot of ricegrass in this, ricegrass, both plants and seeds in this particular session. And I don't have any slides of them, but also a lot of pinion nut hulls, a lot of acorns hulls and acorn caps, and hackberry, a lot of hackberry seeds too were present as potential edible wild food sources. And this is taken from that bag of seeds, and this is on display also in the museum currently. When it came to wood artifacts, here's another area where I found myself, learning something that I hadn't previously thought of. And that is, not only do you have wood artifacts, but you might have the evidence of woodworking. And so there was actually a large number of pieces of wood that evidenced woodworking. And so they were woodworking refuse, so to speak. And in this particular case, what you have are a bunch of wood chips and bark peels from fashioning wood artifacts, wood tools. Here's a pair of cottonwood trays or scoops. I'm not exactly sure what their particular use would be. The one on the left actually has some charring to it, and it's possible that these might have been used for seed parching. But here is an actual specific tool for seed parching, also fashioned from cottonwood. And this is one of maybe 2 complete or near complete examples of parching tools in this session. I've actually seen some others from some of the other collections that I've worked with. It's very well worn on the bottom margin. It's fashioned from cottonwood. These tend to be charred. And there were a number of fragments of these perching tools also in the boomerang section. So they are perching seeds in baskets, hot coals. Here's a wood artifact that was described in the project report as being an umbilical pad. I can't really speak to that. I'm not that familiar with that type of artifact, and I couldn't find an exact match to it. It's fashion. They referenced a report by Guernsey and Kidder, basket maker pit houses in Northeast Arizona, but I don't see an illustration of an artifact that is exactly like this. At least I didn't catch one. It's fashioned from a shaped slab of cottonwood that's got some evident holes that are partial holes that are drilled at the bottom margin. It appears to have been covered with leather, and then also there's some remnant of yucca cordage ties on it. Here's an assortment of gaming pieces. They are all wood, except for the one that is the third from the right, and it is faunal bone. And that is the only faunal bone artifact that is actually in this presentation. There were two of those gaming pieces that I was particularly fond of, so to speak. This one here, it's got an unusual shape. It's almost a boomerang, not quite. It's fashioned from oak. And this and the second one that I'm going to highlight, they were both decorated by wood burning on one surface, on the upper surface, which I found fascinating. And if you look closely at this one, you will notice that there's pairs of very fine burned lines there. This is the second piece that I wanted to highlight, and it is absolutely a work of art. You've got the top on the left, you've got the bottom on the right. That beautifully bilaterally symmetrical. That central line is actually the innermost ring of the wood. It's not decoration, and so it was purposely centered on that. It's taken out of an oak branch, and then these series of very fine burned dots across the central axis of this piece. Just absolutely gorgeous to me. And then the underside has been blackened, and in the analysis that was presented to us, that blackening was said to be from pine pitch that had been applied, or pine pitch that had been applied or made to the bottom and then polished. I can't absolutely speak to that. Here are a couple of wrapped stick artifacts. And so there are a number of sections of branch or sticks that had some sort of wrapping on them. Typically it was split yucca leaf. Most of these were 10 to 15 centimeters long, the section of stick was. These two are much shorter, very similar in their appearance, and conceivably executed by the same person, created by the same person. They were found at a distance from each other, though, in the site. And so the wood is greasewood, and then you have strips of yucca leaf that have been twisted and then formally wrapped around it. And these differed from the other wrap sticks in that the yucca leaf are not only in their length, and then as in they are much shorter, but the fact that they actually were looped over one end of the stick, what I would say is the top of the stick, the top of the artifact. And my take on these is that they are potentially anthropomorphic effigies. And here is a closer view of those two artifacts. There was a remarkable amount of what we chose to describe as modified yucca, as in not formally processed yucca cordage, but yucca leaves that have been knotted together, or raw yucca fiber that had knots in it. And so this is one lot of many, many, many that has fragments of modified yucca in it. And clearly they are using yucca leaves and raw yucca fiber to bind all sorts of objects. We saw it once already in the corn husk bundle. And this is a knotted yucca leaf artifact that go that far. And it appears to be a portion of a yucca leaf harness, carrying harness. And what do I mean by a carrying harness? I mean network of harness used to carry an object. In this particular case, these are two corrugated vessels that are part of the Edge of the Cedars collection. They're not from Boomerang, of course, but they have yucca leaf harnesses on each one. Hundreds and hundreds of fragments of cordage in the Boomerang assemblage. The vast majority of it is yucca fiber. As far as I know, every specimen in this particular lot is yucca fiber, and you can see there's a wide variety in terms of thickness and fineness. There were a number of pieces that were dyed. Typically that dye, they were red, though I did see some black ones also. Close up, allowing you to sort of zoom in on the detail. And this was a remarkable piece of dyed yucca cordage, yucca fiber cordage, bicolor, red and yellow. And it's also, I think, the longest piece of cordage in the entire collection assemblage. And so the central section is dyed red and either end is dyed yellow. My guess is that these were colored using red and yellow ochre. Absolutely beautiful piece. Here is a piece of, or a specimen of juniper bark cordage. There are a number of pieces of juniper bark. Generally, the cordage is fairly crude. Here is a curious cordage artifact. The cordage is produced with sections of split yucca leaf. It's 2-ply, very deliberately wound over itself. I think it had a little carrying loop on it or a suspension loop on it, probably a suspension loop on it. This may be some form of an ornament or possibly a charm. My thought is that there might actually be something on the, hidden on the interior of it. And in looking at this photograph in the artifact itself, as I prepared for this particular presentation, it struck me that this resembled an acorn. This is a small section of what I believe to be animal hair cordage. I sorted it out of a lot that it was labeled as yucca cordage. My belief is that it is dog hair, some white dog hair cordage, and there were a handful of what I thought were dog hair cordage fragments, including this piece right here, which was the only one that actually wasn't white. It's almost a salt and pepper, I don't know, it's just sort of grays and browns and mixed in. And this is also the most robust piece of animal hair cordage that came out of Boomerang. If you were to visit the Edge of the Cedars, you'd find this currently on display also. And I just want to give a shout out to Jonathan, as he does a remarkable job of rotating artifacts out of the various collections that I'm cataloging and into the actual display cases. Many fragments of feather wrapped cordage. And so, as many of you would probably recognize, this is turkey feather wrapped yucca fiber cordage. It was part of a turkey feather blanket. This is probably the largest example of that out of Boomerang. In addition to, I guess I inserted this slide at the last second. So this is a good time to mention that those turkeys, those turkey feathers aren't being brought in from elsewhere. They are homegrown turkey feathers. And so there were dozens, if not hundreds of specimens of turkey poop that were collected out of Boomerang. And not only adult turkeys, but I think also poop from, or more properly, turkey coprolites. So coprolites from baby turkeys or turkey poults. And in that slide on the right-hand side, that upper poop is this little squirty pile of coprolite that is clearly from a small bird, but it's much more substantial than you'd find from again a songbird. And so my guess right now is that those are newly hatched turkeys that are producing that. Back to feather-wrapped cordage. This is feather-wrapped cordage. It's not turkey, but actually it looks to be body feathers from songbirds that have been integrated into, and I'm not actually sure if this is wrapped or if the feathers have been worked into the cordage as it's spun. I'd have to go back and take a look at this one. But you actually have a fair number of feather cordage, feather and yucca cordage artifacts that actually are not turkey, but actually songbird. And a lot of songbird feathers, including a lot of loose songbird feathers, body feathers that are in this assemblage. And it became apparent, and this was with the assistance of a colleague of ours, Chuck LaRue, that it's very, very hard to identify a lot of these body feathers down to bird species. There's a lot of birds that produce feathers that have got white and gray and brown and black in them. In addition to the feather cordage, there's also fur-wrapped cordage. And so this, that's a strip of rabbit fur up top that was either came from fur-wrapped cordage or was produced from fur-wrapped cordage. And then that's a section of rabbit fur-wrapped cordage down below. Another example of fur-wrapped cordage. I'm not sure what species this is, whether this is actually rabbit or not. Here is a beautiful feather artifact, probably a prayer offering of some sort. Those are body feathers off of a turkey, an adult turkey. I think either from the chest or from the back. A colleague told me, I think there are 6 of them total that are there. They have been bound to a section of yucca leaf that has been cut at the bottom and then appears to be deliberately frayed. And the binding there is animal sinew. Another beautiful feather artifact. Those feathers are from a dark-eyed junco. They are the outer tail feathers. And I know that courtesy of Chuck LaRue. And in his analysis of this years ago, he looked at it. I had not known it at the time, but he had looked at several of the feather artifacts at the request of Nick Robbins, I believe. There are at least 3 different individual juncos that contributed feathers to this. The feathers are bound to the ends of super, super fine human hair cordage. And so the feathers are bound to either end of a section of human hair cordage that is then looped, and the binding material looks like hafting material. It's pitch and maybe a mixture of charcoal. And that one of the loops, the cordage loops, is broken up top, and you can see that I think it's either 4 or 5 strands of hair that comprise the cordage. It's like, and it's 2-ply cordage. It is just, it was, and I was looking at this artifact again, I was just absolutely astonished at just how fine it was. Here is another modified feather artifact that appears to have been deliberately cut. Our thought is that this was fletching or intended for fletching on an atlatl dart. The species was identified once again by Chuck LaRue as being Canada goose. So it's a flight feather from a goose. And here is just one of the most amazing things that I've ever cataloged in my life. And the backstory here was that Jonathan was assisting Kayla Woodward, who does the Mesa Verde podcast, on a visit here to the Edge of the Cedars, and he was showing her items in the Edge of the Cedars collection that were possible trade items. And so Kayla was putting together an episode of the Mesa Verde Voices on trade items, and looking at shells and turquoise, shell ornaments and turquoise. And at some point they joined me in the cataloging room, and we were discussing what other possible artifacts might indicate trade. And we were thinking of like Narbona Pass chert, I think, and Sydney spotted chert. As Jonathan and Kayla were exiting the cataloging room, Jonathan turned to me, and with a grin he said, "Jay, I want you to find me a macaw feather." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, I will." That's like, I sort of laughed. It's like, I'll do it. Literally, I think in the next week or so, I'm cataloging items out of a faunal box of faunal artifacts. And lo and behold, here was a small plastic bag that had this feather. And I was just absolutely flabbergasted. I was blown away. I was abuzz when I looked at this thing. I could not believe it. And I was all alone. There was nobody there to share my joy at the time. I texted a photo of it to Jonathan. He was out of the museum. And I didn't hear back from him right away, but I also texted a photo of this to Chuck LaRue. And I'm going to just skip to this. Here's a screenshot of my exchange with Chuck. I just sent it to him cold, no text. He got back to me in 2 minutes. And here's what it says. "Whoa, that can only be macaw. Where from?" And then he added 2 minutes later, "No bird in North America has feathers of that size and color." I replied, "My thought also, boomerang." And he replied, "Very cool." Anyhow, as folks may know, there's a very famous artifact in the Edge of the Cedars, which is this macaw feather sash. But other than that macaw feather sash, there was only one other macaw feather in the entire Edge of the Cedars collection, and that was from Westwater Ruin. And this joined it as the second macaw feather in our entire collection. Obvious trade item, and also this would have to post-date the Basket Maker 2 occupation. This has to be associated with the Pueblo 2, Pueblo 3 use of the alcove. And I noticed just before I showed up at this presentation that was the only photograph I had of an artifact that didn't have a scale in it. And so that's about 4 centimeters in height. And I just wanted to also compare just the coloration between that dyed piece of cordage and the macaw feather. Not that they are temporally related. I don't necessarily believe they are. The cordage could be far older, but it just struck me that how closely they mirrored each other in their coloration. Probably hundreds of basket fragments. I think there were a couple of near complete baskets that were collected from Boomerang, but they were cataloged early on. Some of the prime artifacts that came out of Boomerang and out of this project were cataloged years before I ever worked at Edge of the Cedars. They were cherry picked, so to speak. But most of the basket fragments that I looked at, in fact, the vast majority of them, were coiled baskets A lot of them appeared to be trays, variations on rod or split rod and bundle. A lot of them with wood stitch, some of them with the yucca leaf stitch. I don't remember seeing any plated basketry, any ring basket or evidence of ring baskets. This is an interesting basket fragment because it evidences repair, where you can see in the lower right the original basket with its wood, a coil, partial coil from the original basket with its wood stitch, and then it was repaired somewhat crudely with yucca fiber, not yucca fiber, but yucca leaf stitch. And this is one of the exceptions to that in terms of this is a very unusual type of basketry. I had no understanding of it or nothing to reference it against. And so Chris Hansen, director here, he reached out to Chris Lewis from Zuni Pueblo. Chris Lewis has worked with Laurie Webster in the Cedar Mesa Perishables project, and in part analyzing baskets in the various collections that they've been looking at. And he reported that he had seen a basket with this type of construction in a museum collection back east, and I can't remember which one. I think it's in New York. And he described the basket as being a typical coiled basket in the bottom, and then the upper walls were this open type of construction. And so, and that basket, that example that he had seen had been collected out of Grand Gulch. And so this would seem to be a very rare basketry expression. This is a neat expedient tool. This is a brush that was fashioned out of basal clumps of a bunch grass. And it would be either, my guess, either sand dropseed or rice grass. And so the working end is in the upper right there. It's actually foxed out on a bevel. And my guess is that this brush was being used on a stone surface, such as a matati. Here are what are described as two problematical basketry objects. They're constructed out of split twigs. I will not be able to adequately describe their construction. I don't think at this point, because I get sort of crosswise with them. But the one on the left actually has an intact end on the upper end. That's intact, and so you have sort of a vertical foundation there, or a straight foundation, and then the piece that's bent back over is then sequentially wrapped around that foundation, and then at regular intervals, that wrapping piece is cut horizontally about halfway through, and small flaps are peeled off from that in sequence. On the piece on the left, those flaps are angled out in two different directions. On the piece on the right, they're angled out in one direction. And these artifacts fascinated me because, as it turns out, there's a handful of similar artifacts that have been recognized and found in dry alcove situations. Not many, but over a wide area. And so I think the first published photograph of one of these, here's a detailed photograph of the second one with the fringe to one side. And I think the first published reference is in the Ancient Culture of the Fremont River in Utah, which was done by Noel Morris, published in 1931. And it's funny, he actually describes this as being, this particular object as being of split yucca leaf. And I have a hard time recognizing that from this photograph. And I'm not sure if that's a mistake or if I'm trying to outguess somebody who's a professional. But here are two examples of what are clearly split twig specimens. And these were recovered from Cowboy Cave once again. The northwest across the Colorado River in Fremont Territory. These were published in Jesse Jennings' report on Cowboy Cave. And the other examples that I am aware of come from all the way over in Colorado. There are examples found in Dolores Cave and then Tabaguachi Cave. And so only a handful of these, wide area of distribution. I think each of those sites has a basket maker 2 component, but it's not absolutely clear to me whether these are strictly associated with basket maker 2 occupations. To me, on some level, these look like these could be zoomorphic, but not your typical split twig figurine showing, say, a sheep. Something that's more many-legged. Here is a basketry button, for lack of a better term, made out of yucca leaf, possibly used as a marker, possibly, can't absolutely say what the purpose of this was, but a beautiful little object. Here is a juniper bark bundle that immediately struck me as being more than just a bunch of bark folded over each other. It's very purposely constructed, the folding pattern, and I couldn't really illustrate it through photographs as in from multiple angles, but it has a central body and then sort of sides on either front and back in reference to this photo, or left to right. And it struck me as being a possible effigy, in particular a duck effigy, constructed of juniper bark. It didn't seem plausible to me that this was actually just some expedient folding of juniper bark. I ran this by Chuck LaRue and others, and nobody had ever seen a juniper bark effigy before. Can't say for sure whether that's what we're looking at here, but this thing struck me as very unusual construction. And just to compare it, this is a headless bird effigy vessel. It's not from Boomerang, it's from the Edge of the Cedars collection. It's a Chapin Gray vessel. But this is sort of what I was thinking when I thought, well, maybe this here is an effigy figure of some sort. A beautiful, fine, simple ornament constructed of 3 small acorn caps threaded with yucca cordage, and there was probably that cordage probably formed a small loop, suspension loop at the top, which subsequently broke. The bottom, the upper 2 caps are right side up, and the bottom cap is flipped over. This is one of the few ceramic artifacts that's in this show. This is the only one that's taken from Boomerang. This is a cloud blower pipe. It's a redware pipe. Our guess is that it's Siggy orangeware, and so it was manufactured south of the San Juan River, Canta area. Does not have any paint on it. It's got a polished red slip, but would clearly postdate the basket maker 2 occupation. And it's been modified. And the modification is curious because that central stripe that you see on the barrel, and then also the bottom end, that sort of dull red, that isn't actually paste clay that's been exposed through a braiding of the slip. That's actually a later painted design, or it's applied paint that is raw red clay, a thin slurry of raw red clay that's been painted on there. And I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. Looking into the bowl of this pipe, I noticed that there were actually 1 or more downy feathers that were present, along with charred residue. And it struck me that this was probably intentional. Here's another jewel, and this is the only projectile point that's in this show. This is once again out of Boomerang. It is a classic basket maker side notch dart point. Beautiful piece, fashioned from Chalcedony. But there is more to this piece than meets the eye in this slide, because the blade has been significantly modified. And specifically, the blade has been modified. The margins of the blade have been heavily ground. And so they have been broadly ground and rounded. They are smooth, and that also goes for the tip. And then both the top and bottom, or the either face of the blade, has also been ground and polished, removing to a large degree the flake scars that were on the blade. The haft retains the original edge flaking, but the blade has been seriously ground down on the margins and on the top and the bottom. And once again, I've run this by several folks. Nobody's seen anything quite like this. This is clearly not a functioning projectile point. It's been transformed into some sort of offering or ceremonial object, would be my guess. And so at this point, we're going to actually exit from artifacts that are from Boomerang Shelter. This is from a session that goes back to River House Ruin. And as many folks here listening in or watching who would probably recognize, River House is a site on the San Juan River, just upstream from Butler Wash. There's a photograph of River House from the 1890s that already shows huge back dirt piles out in front of it that had been heavily dug for artifacts at that point in the 1890s. But at the same time, there was still a significant amount, and a lot of standing wall in there. And that ties into the fact that there was still a significant amount of intact cultural fill there. In the mid-70s, there was a stabilization project. And it was an old school stabilization where they dug underneath the walls and then put in concrete footers. It's the kind of thing that we would never do today. But what ended up happening is that there was a fair amount of artifacts, including a lot of perishables, that were collected out of River House at that time. There's boxes and boxes of material. Most of those were accessioned and cataloged years ago, but somehow the artifacts that were photographed for the final report were not turned over to the museum until 2018. And so I ended up cataloging, it was approximately 18 articles that were from River House that were from that report. This just amazed me. I'd never seen anything like it. It's extremely delicate at this point. It is a chain of strips of yucca leaf, where a split section of yucca leaf is repeatedly doubled back on itself and to produce a series of links, and then knotted into another similarly linked piece of yucca leaf to form a chain. Jonathan has seen I had no idea how these might possibly function. Jonathan told me that he had seen similar artifacts, I think in the Mesa Verde Museum, is that correct?
I can't remember now.
And that these were being used to suspend ears of corn for drying. And so there's despite its almost ornamental aspect, that it had a practical purpose to it. And so this was probably the best example out of River House, but there are evidently dozens of other specimens or collected at the time based on what my review of the artifacts from that site. Here is a complete arrow foreshaft that was recovered from River House. And it would have been a wood blunt. It did not have a hafted, would not have had a hafted projectile point. Two fire making related objects. The top is a fragment of a hearth board, and the bottom is the distal end, the working end of a fire drill at the left, And that fire drill was then itself repurposed as a hearth board. You can actually see the remnant of a socket on the right-hand side from its use as a fireboard or hearth board. There were several boxes of artifacts that had been collected during stabilization projects in Grand Gulch in the 70s that I also had the luck to catalog in the last few months. I know that Split Level Ruin was one of the sites that was stabilized, and also Junction Run. A lot of fascinating artifacts there, including cotton, a lot of cotton cordage and rock cotton. This feather comes from Split Level. There was a note accompanying it by Winston Hurst, and so Winston was working at the museum at the time. Winston is, for those who may not know, Winston is an eminent archaeologist in Southeast Utah, a good friend of mine and colleague. And anyhow, his note was this feather had not been formally, it wasn't present on the formal inventory of artifacts when it was turned over to the museum, and he thought it might be a possible flicker feather. When I took a look at it, I'm confident that there's no way this came from a flicker, and my best guess is that this is yet another macaw feather. I've run this by Chuck LaRue, and Chuck agreed that it was probably from a macaw, which would make now 3 individual feathers that we have in the museum collection. I'm not absolutely positive on this one, but I think that's a pretty good hypothesis. And there's also attached to it a small wad of fiber, which I believe is cotton. Here is a lot of ceramic sherds. These were all the sherds that were on a site that was documented in Cottonwood Wash as part of the Cottonwood Great House, Cottonwood Great House Survey, which was a project that was the foundation for a doctoral thesis by Nancy Mahoney out of Arizona State University. And so she had permission to collect a range of both ceramic and lithic artifacts on that project. These were open sites. These particular sherds caught my eye immediately because of their yellowish blush. And as it turns out, they are almost certainly Jedido plain, from a Jedido plain jar. And Jedido is a Hopi ceramic type, post 1300. And so it is actually a post-abandonment for this region, a revisit ceramic type. You can see that it's got a coarse sand temper. The jar, there's a rim sherds up to the top. The rim is everted. A couple of the sherds actually have a grayish cast to them because the firing wasn't really well controlled. These were probably incidental on the larger site. The larger site was, the rest of the larger site in terms of its artifacts, is my understanding or my recollection is that it was all lithics. I include this because this is one of those mystery artifacts that you wish you could just turn back the hands of time and get a little bit more information on it. This is a bundle of sticks, very nicely prepared. I think they're greasewood. I can't remember an exact count, but there's at least, I think at least 12 there, with a very beautiful formal tie of corn husk. They've been debarked. Several of them evidence previous use. Some of them look like they were somewhat freshly prepared. Some of them have longitudinal grooves at one end. They are tapered at one end. The handwritten note that accompanies them reads, "Collected by a hiker in the Grand Gulch who turned them into the NPS, as in the National Park Service at Canyonlands, who returned them to BLM, Dale 12904. And Dale would be Dale Davidson. And you're like, oh my goodness. Really would like to know more about where these were found and what the circumstances were. This is another artifact, interesting artifact that's from a mystery collection, so to speak. In this case, the accession was a law enforcement collection. It was fairly extensive. The vast majority of it was flaked lithic, a little bit of groundstone also, and a handful of perishables. There seemed to be a limited amount of excavation, so to speak, pot hunting, looting, that was part of this particular law enforcement incident. But we have no details at all as to even when it took place. I have a guess, or exactly where. But this thing caught my eye immediately. This item caught my eye immediately because, as far as I can tell, this is a yucca leaf rendition of a zoomorphic effigy in the style of a split twig figurine. And so it has a body that is composed of 3 yucca leaves that are folded back and forth. I think at this point, the head has been twisted out of position. It would have been rotated upwards and to the left with the muzzle out to the left. And so this would have resembled the split twig figurines that are, of sheep. I can't say how complete it is, whether it ever had legs or not, whether I don't think it had any further binding that was vertical. Here's detail showing how the terminal yucca leaf is then folded back and then wound over the head and the neck of the figure. And then what really sort of jazzes me up, so to speak, is that there's actually emerging from the body a small section of a cut twig. And once again, I have run this concept of a yucca leaf rendition of a split twig effigy figure by various folks, and nobody has ever heard of one before. If anybody has, feel free to contact the museum, contact Jonathan. This is something I'd really love to actually get a date off of to see whether it was actually contemporary with split twig figurines or not. My guess when looking at this collection was that the vast majority of it, if not all of it, was from San Juan County, just based on the lithic materials that I've seen, but I can't be absolutely sure. And in terms of what style of split twig figurine it resembles, it would actually resemble more closely the ones from the Grand Canyon than the ones from the Green River. But I don't know if that's an apt comparison, given the fact that the material is different and the construction is slightly different. This is a pendant. The bottom margin had broken off and been refashioned. This is also from that same collection, another interesting mystery piece. When I looked at it, it sort of resembled turquoise, but wasn't clearly turquoise, and I thought it might be green turquoise. I showed this to Chris Hansen, the director here, and for those who don't know it, Chris is an excellent jeweler. He really knows his gemstones, so to speak. And his hypothesis, and it's a strong one, is that it's not turquoise, but something that is similar in appearance. It's a mineral known as variscite. And if you search the literature, you don't find variscite referred to as an ornament material in prehistoric collections, hardly at all. I think I came across one reference to variscite from analysis of trade as evidenced in ornaments in the Fremont region. Chris shared this photograph with some of his jewelry making colleagues to see what their thoughts were, and some of them seem to think that this could actually be sourced to a specific historic mine, not that it was mined historically, that's up in northwest Utah on the west side of Salt Lake, known as the Lucin mine, L-U-C-I-N. Working hypothesis, but I just thought that was fascinating. One, if this came from one, that it could possibly be variscite, which is seems to be a little recognized ornament material. And two, that it could actually be from a distance of several hundred kilometers in its origin. I could have done a whole program on artifacts that come out of the Moab region. In addition to material coming out of the Monticello field office, we also get a lot of collections that are generated out of the Moab BLM field office. I want to highlight just 3 of those. This is an extraordinary knife blade. It was collected out of Grand County, north of the Colorado River. It was a tributary canyon to the Green. It's fashioned out of KDB quartzite, out of silicified sandstone. These 4 sherds are from an Uncompahgre brownware jar that was collected in northern San Juan County. These would be Ute in origin, protohistoric, ethnohistoric in age. Uncompahgre brownware is, to my mind, is always special, and it's always rare, particularly down at our end of the county. I've seen it twice. And here's another Ute artifact that's historic. This is a flaked piece of glass collected as an isolated find, once again in San Juan County, I think in the northern end of San Juan County. This is from the glass shard is taken from the bottom, the base of the jar. And in my experience, looking at flake glass artifacts, they're typically associated with Ute sites and Paiute sites, and not with Navajo sites in this region. I have also seen flake glass artifacts at Icaria sites over in New Mexico. And finally, this beauty. And at times I would be walking the shelves and I would notice boxes that did not have any catalog numbers on the outside. For some reason, they had been skipped over, and this artifact comes out of one of those. This originated with a field school that was known as the Butler Wash Archaeological Project. It was an extensive survey and site documentation and excavation that was conducted in the mid-70s by the University of Denver, north of Highway 95 and Butler Wash. The vast majority of artifacts that were collected on that project had been cataloged years ago. I did get to catalog several boxes of botanical and faunal artifacts a while ago. And I think that's how I stumbled on a box that was sort of the mystery box. It was like the orphan children. And it was artifacts that were poorly provenienced for the most part, or had no provenience whatsoever. And whoever had been doing the cataloging of the other artifacts at the time, all the lithics and ceramics, had skipped over it. And this is sort of a little bit like Christmas, as is often the case in cataloging, as in you never know what a box is going to have inside of it until you open it. And there on top was this beauty. It is an atlatolite. It is at present the only complete atlatolite in the Edge of the Cedars collection. And it was an isolated find, and it was collected by the botanical survey crew that worked in conjunction with the archaeological survey and excavation crew on that field project. And their proveniencing was actually a bit better. They don't have a point plot on the map, but I have a pretty good idea of where this came from. That's a top view, that's a side view. And also in that box, another present, so to speak, and the final artifact we're going to look at is this, and we're going to end on a local historic note. This is a custom-made sheep ear tag that was for L.K. Jones of Blanding, here where the Edge of the Cedars is located. I had previously seen a similar ear tag on a survey outside of Fruta or Grand Junction back about 2011. And that was for a gentleman from Cedar City, Utah. This was the second one I've ever seen. And as it turns out, I can't find another example in any Google search of a third example. Those are the only two. There are no photographs that I've seen. Winston has shown this to the Jones family, and he expected them to possibly have other examples in their collection. First time they'd ever seen it. This, unfortunately, was collected by a visitor to the field school who wandered out west of camp and found this and brought it back to camp. And the problem being is that we don't know exactly where the field camp was at that time. Perhaps with a little bit of work, we could establish that. Maybe Winston already has established that, but we could go back out and see if there's more artifacts associated with that sheep herding camp. And that's the end. We'd like to thank, first and foremost, the ancestors and their descendant communities, the BLM of Utah, Monticello and Moab field offices, and the Bears Ears National Monument, BLM curator Diana Barg. We had the assistance of a number of colleagues and friends, outside scholars, including Karen Adams, Chuck LaRue, Lori Webster, Chris Lewis, Chris Hansen, and Winston Hurst. It's been a series of BLM grants that have allowed me to do this cataloging, along with one grant from the NEH in 2020 during the plague year, or the big plague year. They definitely came in handy. And also thank you to the Four Corners Lecture Series and Crow Canyon for supporting this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay and Jonathan. That was amazing. Seeing so many, especially perishable items that most of us never see is just, it adds so much to how we can sort of under imagine these cultures when we just look at flake stone and pottery sherds.
Yes.
So that was really an amazing talk. I really appreciate it. And lots of positive comments coming in about the talk. There are a few questions, and the first ones came from people who had no idea what quids were. So they asked, what is a quid? And then some of them knew that quids were something that had been chewed, and they asked, what was the purpose of chewing a quid? So can you talk a little bit more about the corn quids?
I think the corn quids are just basically, it's something to have in your mouth that tastes pleasant and keeps your mouth moist during the summer. I don't think there's anything more specific to it than that. They're not like the fiber quids when you're trying to produce some sort of end product, but more it's just, I just sort of think it's a casual activity would be my take on the whole thing. I don't think there might be some sort of minimal nutritional aspect to it, but I don't think that would be significant. And so what part of the corn plant are they chewing on? It's like corn husk and corn leaf and even corn stalk. And Jonathan, and I just want to interject that Jonathan reminded me that we should also very much thank the folks who organized the Colorado Plateau Agricultural Project, and that would be Ken Smiley, Professor Ken Smiley down at NAU, and also Mick Robbins, who worked with him. And there were a host of graduate students that produced theses out of that project. And so I just want to interject that also.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers the quid question, but there were hundreds of corn quids in this assemblage.
Yeah, and that corn would probably be pretty sweet too, wouldn't it?
I want to try. I have never chewed on any corn like that. I want to, but I don't actually have any corn growing at my house right now.
Yeah.
None that's readily accessible.
Well, that's neat. People commented on, they couldn't believe how fresh the corn and beans, some of the corn and beans that you showed were, and asked how could that be? How could it look so fresh? And I'll let you answer that one and then follow up with another one.
My answer is that dry alcoves are miracles of storage. And clearly they were isolated from any sort of insects or rodents, or any moisture whatsoever for the most part. They don't seem, my understanding, did not go through, every site, every provenience form for these. But my understanding, for example, for the beans, is they weren't in any isolated, necessarily in any container. So it's just simply the miracle of a dry alcove, the isolation from moisture and the protection from insects or rodents that would do damage to them.
And because they look so perfect, somebody asked the question of, have any of the beans been germinated?
I was going to interject that at some point when I was going through this talk in my head, and I forgot that part. I just want to put to rest the idea that you can germinate 100-year-old beans. It does not happen. It's a myth. It's a good story, but it does not happen. That's true for the corn also. So I love Anasazi beans, so to speak. They come out of Dove Creek. They are absolutely delicious. They're a variety of Jacob's cattle bean, but they are not grown from beans that were found in a ceramic pot underneath some overhang.
So I think every botanist would agree with you. I do have to say that one of my friends over here is Bessie White, that found beans in a pot and claims she germinated them and grew them and still grows from that line today. And she just doesn't strike me as somebody that would lie.
Those could be magic beans is about the only thing that I can say. But I at some point in my previous lifetime, I did a bit of reading on it. And I think the oldest seeds that have ever been successfully germinated were lotus seeds that were recovered from anaerobic mud deposits that were, at the bottom of some sort of pond or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are remarkably well preserved. But I've seen, even recently, I've seen a variety of squash that was claimed to have been grown from squash seeds that were prehistoric. It's just like,
can't happen.
As a quote unquote scientist, I would say it didn't happen that way.
Right. Somebody asked, can you know what the population of the Boomerang site was during its various occupations?
Someone more knowledgeable on estimating population size could do that. I could not.
Mm-hmm. It's unusual. I've been there. I actually visited there with Phil Geib and a Crow Canyon crew one time. And the fact that there aren't later architectural remains in the alcove, what's your take on that?
It seems very curious to me.
Yeah, me too.
There's obviously some limited use to that site that postdates the Bassmaker 2 as evidenced by one, the cloud blower, two, the macaw feather, and also a handful of other sherds that are present, and quite possibly also the beans. But you look at the cloud blower and you look at the macaw feather, and those both seem indicative of some sort of offering, actual activity, and potentially for some reason. That's what the use of that site was largely limited to. It's hard to say, but it does strike me. There's obviously giving away location, a fairly robust later architectural site that's halfway close to it.
Smiley and his crews documented lots of cysts in that site.
Yeah.
Loads of cysts, but no other architectural features that I know of.
Yeah, no, it's level upon level of cyst. When I took during my visit, I was just absolutely astonished. It was just like one level of, built on top of another, built on top of another.
So for people who are tuned in that might not know what a cyst was, can you briefly describe it and then follow up by answering, are all of the cysts, do they go with the Basket Maker 2 component?
Okay, yeah. So these are storage units that were excavated at least partway underneath the prehistoric grounds, the existing existing prehistoric ground surface, and they were the ones that were in evidence during my visit were slab lines. So they had slabs of sandstone that lined the walls, and they would have been capped in some fashion, probably with an assemblage of wood and mud. And I've seen cysts that have been closed in that fashion before. Sometimes you have cysts that are just excavated straight into the sediment, and once again are sealed. I don't know what the dating was on that sequence of cysts. Like I said, they were built one level over another. I'd have to go back at the report, but I was, discussing this site with Winston recently, and he thought some of the earliest cysts that were in that site actually were archaic in age.
Yeah.
They predated the Basque II occupation.
That's just so interesting. We normally do use rooms and architecture to estimate population. So except for the cysts, the lack of architecture at that site, I think would make it really hard to estimate population there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked, were there no pieces of shell found in the shelter?
I think there was one, there's possibly one. I ended up having to just, once again, sort of constrain, what I was showing here. And I'd have to go back and look at actually the inventory to see and what I cataloged. It's not that I wouldn't have expected that. I'm thinking off the top of my head. Yeah, there's
Abalone shell pen.
Yeah, there's an abalone shell pendant, Jonathan reminds me. And then there were definitely some beads in there. There was a giant, I think there was a giant jet bead out of jet, the largest jet bead that I've ever seen.
Wow.
I can't remember if there was any olivella shell beads that were in there. It's quite possible there were. There were also, and I wanted to include these and I just ran out of space, there were seeds that were fashioned out of juniper seeds, where one end was ground off and then a hole was punched through the far end. And so those would have been strung. There was a series of juniper seed beads in there, as well as just a lot of juniper seeds in general. And also, it's probably a good time to mention that there was an extraordinary ornamental object that was recovered out of Boomerang, and that was the beetle leg necklace.
Wow.
I think was actually the subject of an earlier presentation.
Actually, that presentation is there will be a presentation on the beetle leg necklace in a couple of months, in October, I think.
Oh.
By Michael Turlip. So we'll be talking about that in a couple of months.
Probably the most amazing artifact I've ever seen. That it's number one on my list.
Cool.
Yeah, you can go to the museums in Europe and you'll never see an artifact that amazing. That is just, that's part of what makes Edge of the Cedars my favorite museum in the world.
Yeah, and it's just astonishing, once again, that something so fragile, and it's just a reflection about something just so incredibly fragile.
Unbelievable.
Has survived thousands of years like that.
So perfectly. Just unbelievable. And that's one that goes back to the way we underimagine the past, because we just have such fragments of it, and that people were walking around with beetle leg necklaces. It's just like helps you just appreciate how rich and aesthetic the culture was and how amazing. We'll move through the last few pretty quick because it's getting late. Somebody asked, I don't think they'd ever seen little tiny seeds before, and they didn't know what they were collecting those seeds for. So I know you know. Can you tell us?
My guess is that they were collecting them to eat them.
Yeah.
Nick Robbins thought that those seeds were examples of ruderal plants, plants that grow up around agricultural fields. They're wild, but they're there because of the human activity, and so that was Mick's take on them. They're plants that were seeds that could be gathered fortuitously, but in association with farm fields.
Yeah, they're weedy species that would crop up around farm fields. And so once again, there was a lot of rice grass in there, but you wouldn't find rice grass necessarily growing around fields. And that's what sort of set that collection of seeds apart.
Yeah, I remember that Kim and maybe Mick produced a publication comparing Boomerang to Davidson Cave. It has another name too. The one that's off of
Milk Ranch Point.
yeah, right. And they showed the difference between rice grass and sand drop seed and argued that there was a change in mobility after corn was introduced because of the different seasonality of those two. Really interesting article. Somebody said that they couldn't hear, I don't know if they're still on, couldn't hear what you said about the prepared bundle of sticks and what you thought the sticks were used for.
I do not know what those sticks were used for. I will just, it's.
And somebody wrote in and asked if you've been able to distinguish different types of squash.
That is an excellent question. And so that's something, once again, the whole squash or gourd thing is something that is very intriguing to me that I plan to pursue further. On the gourd end, just it's like, where the heck is the direct evidence for gourd cultivation? I don't have it with me, but there's an interesting historic real photo postcard that I have seen from Hopi from the early 20th century. And it shows a couple, it's titled, cutely enough, Hopi Thanksgiving, but it shows a Hopi couple posed in front of their house with a variety of squash. And I can actually recognize in one of those photos what I think is known as Hopi green black squash, which I can't find seeds for right now, at least in terms of squash that produce of any size. There seems to be, there's one other whole squash artifact that's on display in the museum here. It's labeled as a gourd, but it's in the little display case of food-related items, and it's a squash, and it still retains some of the skin, and it really looks like a Hopi green black squash. And that's just sort of a hip shoot guess without having to actually examine a live green black squash, just going off that old photograph and some photographs I've seen online of those squash grown by other people. There's another Hopi variety that I am aware of called Hopi Pale Gray that I'm trying to grow out this year just to see what it, whether it produces a woody shell or not. Because that's the other thing that intrigues me is that these prehistoric squash are producing woody shells, and a lot of them are squash that we typically cultivate do not. They have thin rinds.
So not being a gourd, go ahead.
I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Not being a gourd head like you and our friend Ben Bellarato, Ben's another gourd head.
He sure is.
Can they grow in the wild? Or do they have to be cultivated?
My guess is that they would probably be cultivated, but I can't say for sure. And it brings up, if I can digress slightly, there's a third cucurbit species, a third species from that family that I just want to briefly mention. And that's what's known as the coyote gourd or the bitter melon. And so that is a species that is native to the Southwest and probably into Mesoamerica. And there's in Utah, as far as and it's a non-edible cucurbita. And so it's in the same genus as the winter squash, but it's extraordinarily bitter. And it produces a little fruit that's fairly regular, that's got a very thin, hard shell. And I just want to make sure, one, that folks don't confuse those with the squash or the gourds that I'm talking about. I'm talking about bottleneck gourds or dipper gourds. And I forgot to actually put up the species name for those. The Lagenaria is the genus. But Riverhouse, I was reading, through the report that Riverhouse had a large number of coyote gourd specimens. And I'm like, that's crazy because I've never seen coyote gourds growing in the wild here. And I took a peek in one of the boxes end of last week or beginning of this week. And sure enough, they have a whole bunch of coyote gourd fragments, including coyote gourds that look as if they've got purposeful ornamentation, decoration on them. And that just blew my mind because coyote gourds do not grow here, as far as I know, they do not grow here typically anymore. And reading the Utah flora, they were found, for example, along Glen Canyon, the Glen Canyon drainage. And so, possibly they're also found in the San Juan, along the San Juan too. But that's the only example of those that I'm familiar with. As to wild gourds, I think they probably on some level had to have been able to survive in the wild. Just really quickly, the bottle gourds are thought to originate from the Old World, and their introduction to the Americas could have been twofold. They could have actually floated here, and so there's a strong working hypothesis that some of them actually floated over from Africa.
Right.
And then also they could have been brought by folks who are migrating into the Americas. Both are certainly plausible and quite possible.
Right.
Certainly the ones that floated over, it would seem that those might have germinated and actually flourished in the wild before they were actually collected and domesticated, so to speak.
Right. We'll do two more questions, getting late. Appreciate everybody who's hanging in there, and especially for you all as speakers to hang in there with us. I just find this so interesting. Somebody asked the dates on the organics. Do you know any of the range of dates on the maize or other organics?
I definitely, I wanted to include something on that. I just didn't get around to go digging back in their reports. But I do know that they got some dates for both the squash and some of the corn that was at least 2,500 years before present.
Wow, that's really old.
And then there was the archaic sandal fragment that was thousands of years earlier.
Right. I think Phil Geib told me he made a pair of those sandals and wore them around. He replicated a pair of those that he found.
He's
Anyway.
older than I thought.
Yeah, right. Okay, last question. Are there any of these artifacts, especially the perishable artifacts that you find where it might be hard to know what they're used for? Do you ever see any of them depicted in rock art?
That's an excellent question. My answer is it's possible. There's a very curious, I don't know how I'm going to be able to describe this in public, but there's I've seen pictographs of a horizontal array that seems to have pendant corn cobs or something like that, but that's not how they're described. So in theory, maybe it's a depiction of like drying ears of corn. And then I would refer, without being specific to Boomerang or anything that I've cataloged, if you go to Sally Cole's book, Legacy on Stone, there is an excellent example of that by huge chance I actually played a part in, as in there was recovered from Turkey Pen Road and Grand Gulch was a string of projectile points on yucca cordage, I believe. And it strongly resembles a petroglyph that I found in Butler Wash that was at the time generally unknown to anybody. Sally had not seen it. And she actually used a photograph that I took of that petroglyph and referencing it as a possible depiction of an artifact similar to that recovered from Turkey Pen.
Mm-hmm. It's not an artifact, but in terms of the plant remains that you showed, I think of the harvest scene that back in
Rice grass.
In Canyonlands, holding that big fist of rice grass.
Oh, that's one of the most astonishing, pieces of rock art that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just absolutely mind blowing to me.
Okay, we got one last question. You showed turkey coprolites. Any evidence that they were feeding corn to the turkeys?
You know, it's a good question. I didn't, I
You
didn't
didn't take the
any of,
poop apart?
I didn't take any of them apart, but there was no evidence, if it was, if they were eating corn, at least corn kernels, it was well digested, because basically what I see primarily is fibrous plant remains.
Right.
Nor do I see any insect parts, but it's gonna just very quickly digress, given, how far we've gone, but one of the participants in the stabilization problem, one of the crew members for the stabilization project for River House was Wayne Howell. He lived in Bluff for a while. I don't know Wayne that well. He's fresh out of field school, and he recalled excavating a feature that seemed to be a turkey pen that was I think it was sequentially layers of turkey poop and what looked to be cicada wings.
Wow.
I think they were cicada wings, as if they were deliberately feeding cicadas to the turkeys. That's anecdotal. But no, I don't see, no direct evidence that the turkeys were eating corn, but I mean, that's something that somebody should look at. And I would just mention also that there are occasionally what look to be canid poops, as in canine poops. And I'm sort of curious whether any of those are actually domestic dog.
Yeah.
And what you might learn from those.
Well, and Bill Leip and his colleagues have shown through other types of analyses like isotope that the turkeys, at least in the later phases, were eating mostly corn for their diet. So there's a comment in the chat that y'all might want to look at, but I'm going to thank you all. And it was just so interesting. I really enjoyed this presentation, and I'm really grateful to both of you for putting on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, we'll
Thanks,
see you
folks.
soon. Hope to see you soon.